Welcome back to the Altered Call YouTube page. We took last week off because I had a nose surgery, and as red as it is currently, it was dramatically worse then. So I didn't feel like filming for a multitude of reasons. Now, that week we talked about the discipleship path and how you should relate to your spouse. If you have any questions about that, want me to go back and cover any of that material, we can, but otherwise I'm just going to skip a week and press on. So on the podcast this week, I talked about worship and how worship is not limited to either religious spaces or specifically the God that we choose to claim. So I think that a lot of Christians trick themselves into saying, this area of my life is non-religious. So God doesn't need to operate here. We don't need to be specifically worshiping him over here because in the religious area where we do our worship, I'm worshiping him there. I think that once you tear down the gates between those two things, you start to realize that a lot of Christians don't actually spend a lot of time and energy worshiping God, or at least not as much time and energy as they would like to think that they do. If our worship is limited to going to church and singing songs and praying and listening to sermons, then yes, all of our worship that we choose to give in that way does go towards God. But if every aspect of our life and every driving motivation that we have is representative of worship, then we have a much bigger problem. And we need to reprioritize our life such that all of those things, not just the religious, but all of the non-religious things that we choose to engage with are also in proper submission to God. And in that episode, I talked about how you could be doing the exact same thing, just the exact same functional process outside of the religious space, and have it be either in submission to God or out of submission to God. So today I want to talk about properly submitting things to God and give an example of how you can do that. So when you submit something to God, you are saying, whatever it is that I'm doing, the end goal is to bring glory to God. Now, you're going to make mistakes along the way. You're going to do things incorrectly. You're going to sin, stumble, whatever you want to call it. But what is your end goal? What is it that you are trying to do? In the deepest, most sincere parts of you, what is it that you're striving towards? And if that is anything other than God, then you have a problem. And it's something that needs to be addressed. So I think a good example of this is with fear and anxiety. When something happens and you become fearful or you become anxious, there's a lot of different ways that you could approach that. So the anxiety itself is not the problem. It's how that anxiety is informed and what you decide to do about it. So if you say, something happened, I'm worried about the future. Okay, that's the trigger. That's not you doing anything. That's you observing something about reality. Now, you might be observing it correctly. You might be observing it incorrectly. Ultimately, that doesn't matter. What you do next and how that belief is informed points to the thing that you're worshiping. So let's take a good example first. Something happens, you become anxious. That's the trigger. We're not into worship yet. From there, you say, okay, God, I can't handle this. Whatever this thing is that has caused me to be anxious is beyond me to some degree. That portion of it that is beyond me, I'm going to hand to you. I'm going to trust that you have my good in mind and or that you will make it right on the back end. Okay? So it's not the anxiety that is the problem. It's what we do with it. We say, God, take this away, and we hand it off to him. That is in proper submission to God. Now, it's a little fuzzier than that, but if you say, God, I'm anxious, God, take it away, that is in submission to God. If you say, something has made me anxious, now I'm going to obsess about the future. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that that event either doesn't come to actuality or to build myself up such that I can overcome it. That's not worshiping God. That's worshiping self. That's saying, God, I don't need you for this. I can rise up and take it on my own. Now, There are things that you can do on your own, and you should do things that you can handle on your own. But ultimately, the anxiety wouldn't be there if you thought that you could, or you thought that you would naturally. So you need to separate these two ideas a little bit. So what I do is I aggressively hand things off to God. I say, God, here's the thing that I don't understand. I'm going to do my part of it. There's pieces of this that I can understand. There's good principles that I can use to get me through the situation. I'm going to do what I know to do. And then the rest of it is you, because I know that I can't handle it. When you're in self-reliance, you say, nope, God, we don't need to talk about this. I'm taking it all. I'm doing it because I'm good enough to do that. Another option for anxiety is to just cave, is to say, whatever this thing is, it's too big. There's no hope. I don't see any future where this is okay. And that's fine too. But you're taking your hope. You're taking a precious resource that you have and you're discarding it. You're saying, God, you're not big enough. You can't handle this, and neither can I. It's just hopeless. We're going to throw it all away. Again, you get to do that. But what are you worshiping? That is not a worship of God to just succumb to anxiety. Now, when the anxiety shows up, that doesn't mean that you handle it perfectly. Sometimes you're going to have to sit in the anxiety for a while before you're willing to hand it to God. Maybe you try to struggle through for a while before you hand it to God, but where do you ultimately end up in the process? Are you relying on yourself? Are you relying on God? Are you just going to give up? And there's a million other things in between. But what informs the process is the thing that you are worshiping. So even if, let's take the self-reliance and the handing it off to God, even if functionally the process of working through that is exactly the same in those two scenarios. You do all the same things to ensure that that future doesn't happen. One of them, you're attempting to do it in your own power and to your own glory. In the other, you're saying, God, I'm doing what I can and I'm relying on you for the rest. And you're pursuing his glory. So that's how you submit your behavior to God, instead of a lesser God that wants and needs that attention. Hopefully you can extrapolate that. Ultimately, every area of your life is in pursuit of something. If you know what the end pursuit is, you know how you're doing. I think another area where people are tempted to get confused is with money. Let's say you have a good job, you make plenty of money. Now, in submission to God, you would say, God, I have enough, because you do in fact have enough. There is a reality that says there's a certain amount of money that you need to make in order to exist in the world. Now, I think people perceive that number to be dramatically higher than it actually is, but there is a reality that to some degree, you either need money or you need something equivalent to money in order to navigate the world that we're in. In proper submission to God, you can say, God, I have enough. Because whatever I don't have, I'm trusting in you for. On the other end, you say, no, I need more, I need more, I need more, because if I had just a little bit more, then I'd be just a little bit safer. I'd be a little bit more insulated. My retirement would be just a little bit nicer, and I kind of need those things. My kids would be a little bit safer. Their future would be more secure. And all of those are good things. But if those are the end instead of the means to submission to God, then I think you have a problem. If you say, God, I trust you with the future of my children, but because I have this extra capacity, I'm going to also take actions to build towards that. That is submission to God. Saying, no, I need to build bigger and bigger and bigger such that I can handle everything either with my own power or through the flexibility that money provides me. Then you've got a problem. That is not in proper submission to God. So trusting in God, it makes things a lot easier. It allows you to worry about only the things that you need to worry about and only focus on the things that you need to do. And this is why I've structured my lessons in the way that I have. We start with this baseline commitment that says, God, you get this because this is what you've called me to. This is the standard that I am going to maintain because either you have demanded it of me or you have given me the skills necessary to maintain that standard in a reasonable way. Now, that is not works-based attempts to save yourself. It is simply stewardship. It is simply saying, God, I know that I can give you this and that you want it. Then from there, with the excess, you get to say, now what do I want to do? Like, we've covered what God wants from me, and we're going to listen to him, and if he decides to change his mind and raise the standard or whatever, we're going to be responsive to that. But beyond that, you get to do whatever you want to do, as long as it doesn't result in worshiping other gods. If you say, okay, God, I've got this standard, but now I'm going to go chase money because you're taken care of here, I'm going to get into heaven, and now I'm just going to go chase money because money's great. The question is why? Why are you chasing the money? If it's because you have a great job and you want to give a bunch of money away to causes or whatever, maybe that's fine. But that doesn't seem like pursuing God. That doesn't seem like pursuing a relationship with him. That seems like, I want to make sure God's taken care of so that I can go do what I want to do anyway. And you get some of that. But you need to put it in submission to God. You need to say, God, I have this capacity to make extra money. Do you need that of me? Is that something that's in my future, or am I just chasing the wind? Is this all nonsense? As if so, I can put it down and I can go focus on the other things that you want me to do. And if you're talking to him and if you're in relation to him, he will point you. He will direct your attention. He may not say, go specifically do this thing, but he might say, hey, you work a lot. Why don't you spend some more time with your family? Why don't you just work less and go pay attention over here? He's not going to tell you specifically what to do, but he can direct your attention. And if you're paying attention to that and listening to him and trying to honor the things that he says, which is very difficult, admittedly, but if you're trying to honor the things that he tells you to do, then I think you're in proper submission. I think that more of your life is worshiping him than not, if you're in that case. And that doesn't mean you don't get to do things just because you like to do them. You get to have hobbies, you get to have fun, you get to do things that aren't inherently godly, but they need to be in submission. They need to glorify God in your ends, not necessarily all of your means. So that's the idea. Next week, we're talking about kids. Kids are ridiculous. Don't ever have any, unless you want to have a meaningful life, and then have fun with it. So that's where we're going. Thanks for listening, and put down your phone and go live some life. Thanks, guys.